Okay, you've got it going. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here with you. I'm Vinay Prasad. I'm associate professor here at the University of California, San Francisco. I'm a HemeOnc doctor of statistics. And this talk is called How to Keep Up with the Medical Literature and Be a Better Reader. And again, my only plug is if you're comfortable and you can turn on your video. So it helps me realize if how it's going. Okay, in terms of disclosure, that's why I like to tell people I'm independently wealthy. If you like this, I host a podcast called Plenary Sessions on the iTunes Store. My research is funded by Arnold Ventures and LLC, and I'm active on Twitter, but you know it's a rough place. You don't want to go there if you don't have to. So case presentation. I think it's was good to start with the case. Close to reality, a little details have been changed to preserve the privacy of those involved. Like so many patients you take care of, it's often not the patient, but the family member that asks the hardest questions. So, you know, I was in recently with a 65-year-old patient of mine who has multiple myeloma. It's a woman with multiple myeloma. She's 65. Sister had a question for me. The sister said, "Doctor, should I increase the amount of exercise I do so that I protect myself against developing multiple myeloma?" As you know, my sister has multiple myeloma. I certainly wouldn't want multiple myeloma. If I exercise more, might I avoid multiple myeloma? That's her question to me. And I thought to myself, well, you know, that's a good question. That's a good question. And then she followed up with a doozy that said, well, didn't you read the news study? Well, didn't you read the news study? And I said, the new study, of course, the new one, not the older study, the new study. Obviously, it's the new study we're talking about. Let me think about this. Let me think about this for a second. And so, you know, later I had a chance to pull up this new study, and here it is. The amount and intensity of leisure time physical activity and lower cancer risk. It's a study that sought to examine whether the amount of activity you report on a self-reported questionnaire correlates with developing incident cancer. And they looked at many cancers. They looked at, you know, 50, 60, 70 cancers, and they looked at about 800,000 participants. Here's what they found. They present their results cancer by cancer. Cancer by cancer. And for multiple myeloma, if you go to the table, this is what you'll find. You'll find there is a reduction in that hazard ratio. It looks quite good. Here it is. The METs per hours per week, and the impact of that. And you see, I don't think we can argue with, this confidence interval does not cross 1. So 15 hours a week, you're in the sweet spot. You are getting protection against developing incident multiple myeloma. No doubt about that. Like most doctors who practice, I had to admit to myself when I saw this figure that I did not know what a MET was. I had no clue what a MET was. It's been a long time. And frankly, perhaps I never even learned what a MET was. So I did what any self-respecting doctor would do, which is I turned my monitor and I Googled Wikipedia. And I found it on Wikipedia. I found METs on Wikipedia. That's what I found. I found that they actually divide them into the intensity of activity. There's light activity, there's moderate activity, there's vigorous activity. If you walk, that earns you 3 METs. If you play doubles tennis, that's 5 METs. Apparently sexual activity involves a certain number of METs, but what I didn't fully understand was why this is adjusted for the age of participant. I didn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought it was perhaps a little ageist. Bicycling on a flat surface, 10 to 12 miles an hour, like I was doing at the time, I was commuting by bike, that was 6 METs and so on and so on. And so I added up my personal effort, how many METs I was putting out a week. And it turned out I was actually, if anything, I wasn't doing so hot. I was out here on the tail of the curve. I was doing so much that obviously the effect was diminuting and maybe there was no protection for me. I needed to back it up a little bit. I took a deeper dive into this paper and I did what I recommend you do when you really commit to reading a paper, which is you got to pull the supplementary appendix and look through it. And so I was looking through the supplementary appendix. This is what I found. I found that there is actually a difference between moderate intensity exercise and vigorous intensity exercise. If you look at vigorous intensity exercise, like riding your bicycle, there was absolutely no relationship between METs per week But for moderate, it looked to be a little bit protective. So, this really is making the case that you want to avoid incident myeloma, moderate intensity exercise, shoot for about 15 hours a week. That's the sweet spot. So how did I feel when I read this study? Well, I felt a little bit frustrated. I felt like this. I was like, what am I reading? What am I reading? I'm looking at 50 different cancers, and they're looking to see METs per week and developing incident cancer. They're making so many possible comparisons for myeloma that happen to get this signal. The signal is it only works with moderate exercise, not with vigorous. It only works at 15 METs per week, but if you did more, you'll diminish the effect. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. Why? It's an implausible finding. I mean, how do you explain from a pathophysiologic standpoint why moderate, not vigorous, why 15 is better than 30? Second point, there's potential for multiple hypothesis testing. How many different cancers are there? I'm a cancer doctor, and even I don't know the answer. I think there's over 200, 400 cancers, 500 cancers. There's a lot of cancers. There's so many different cancers, and each year we carve them in new ways. That means you have many, many ways you can look at this. You can look at exercise for each of these different tumor types. In addition, how do you divide exercise? Why look at it in METs per week? It's a self-reported questionnaire. You can slice and dice it in many different ways. So the number of potential hypotheses you might test is, 10 to the power of 6 in one data set, 10 to the power of 7. There's the issue of confounding. Confounding is a challenge here because if you are ill, if you don't feel good, you may both be more likely to develop cancer and less likely to exercise. So it's the feeling ill, maybe having underlying lupus or RA that actually drives both, perhaps. Maybe there's actually another form of confounding, which is that if you are more likely to develop certain conditions like end-stage renal, you may be more likely to be diagnosed with incident myeloma in the future because they're keeping an eye on you and they're finding out that you have MGUS, and that this may be another sort of backdoor confounding pathway. Finally, there's measurement error. This is all based on what people think that they did when you report your exercise. And frankly, we're not that good at that. Who knows if we're telling you the truth? So these are my challenges with the paper. So what did I do? What did I tell this patient sister? I told this patient sister what any good doctor does, which is I evaded the question rather gracefully and I gave her a good answer, which I said, if you're asking me about exercise and myeloma, if you're asking me, do I believe that staying active is part of a healthy life? Then the answer to you is absolutely. I believe that wholeheartedly. If you're asking me, would I specifically stay active to avoid incident multiple myeloma? Well, my answer to you is I would do it for you as part of a broader pattern of general and cardiovascular health. I think that's really where you're going to gain. And then she followed up with the doozy, which is, but have you read the new paper? Have I read the new paper? Did I read that new paper when she asked me this question? That was the question. And I couldn't evade it anymore. And the answer was no. I hadn't read the new paper. Of course I hadn't read the new paper. How can I read all these papers? There's so many papers that come out. There's papers pouring out of the literature. How can I read papers about incident cancer and exercise? I have so many papers to read about new treatments for cancer. I don't have the time. And I think I'm like many people in that regard. I don't have the time to read all the literature. So in this talk, I hope to give you 3 points. 1, what are the best techniques to keep up with the literature? 2, what are examples of studies that are commonly misinterpreted? And 3, how can you be a better reader of the medical information? That's what I hope to convey. There are 50 million scientific articles indexed in PubMed. I once heard an apocryphal story that in the 1960s, there was a physicist at Yale who passed away. And when he died at his eulogy, somebody said that was the last physicist who knew everything there was to know in physics, because physics had gotten much more complicated and it was a series of many, many subdisciplines. Well, I think if you apply this to medicine, who knows when it occurred, but it is clearly the case there is not a single human being who knows everything in biomedicine. In fact, if you pick people these days, we have mitral valve experts. We have a doctor. The only thing they do in their clinic is mitral valve. They don't even know anything about the other valves. They just know about mitral valve. There are people who know about amyloidosis, about hairy cell leukemia, diseases where in the US, there's 300 patients a year with hairy cell leukemia. We are so specialized. And even that person, I doubt they know everything about hairy cell leukemia. There's no way to know everything in your own field, let alone sort of the broader literature around that. Proof of this. I mean, the articles are piling up at a rate you can't keep up with. This is a few years out of date, like many of my slides, because that's when I made them. But it shows rather clearly that there are more publications indexed in biomedical servers than one can read in a year. I can't even read all the randomized trials in oncology per year. I couldn't even do it. if I tried to read every randomized trial in oncology, my own field, my brain would fail. I wouldn't be able to do it and balance the other duties I have. So we need a better way. We need a way to pick the articles we're going to read. At the same time that you hear about so many articles, you also read headlines like this that make you wonder, well, what the hell are we publishing? Here's one: replication, duplication, and waste, and 250,000 systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Here's another: the mass production of redundant, misleading, and conflicted systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And here's yet another: challenges in irreproducible research. So it isn't enough that there are so many articles, you couldn't possibly read them. Many of them are also not that good. What a challenge. Many articles, not that good. How do you make sense of it? If you wish to fall asleep, you can do so safely, knowing that you can pretty much pick up anything I'm going to say in this lecture in an article I wrote a few years ago for Medscape called The 21st Century Physician, Triaging the Tsunami of Medical Information. But I hope the talk is more engaging than the article. Here's my advice. And I want to say, this is not evidence-based advice. I haven't prospectively randomized doctors to my strategy or a different strategy. I'd love to do so, but I haven't gotten it through the IRB and haven't gotten the grant to do it yet. And also I have a bigger fish to fry. But this is what my heuristic is, what I would recommend to you. 1, timing is everything. I think it's so important that you think about reading articles and keeping up with the literature in terms of timing. We are part of a broader conversation, whether we like it or not, across biomedicine. We talk about articles when they come out. We talk about news when it happens. And so you need to keep your eye on medicine as it's happening if you want to listen into a conversation and have it make sense to you. So what do I know about timing? I know if it's Monday, if it's about the middle of the day on Monday, and I could be walking from rounds or from clinic to rounds or something like that, and I'm at the elevator and I'm waiting for it, what am I going to do? I'm going to pull up my phone and I'm going to go and I'm going to check new articles on JAMA Internal Medicine. Why? JAMA Internal Medicine, they drop the new articles on Monday. And you want to look at the new articles on Monday because that's when they're coming and that's when people are going to be buzzing about it. What about Tuesday? Middle of the day Tuesday, you know, about noon Central Standard Time. That's when Mama JAMA drops the new articles. And that's where I am. I'm looking to see what was that new research letter that looks at automobile fatalities after lockdown. I'm kind of curious. Just dropped. I want to know what it has to say. Wednesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There is no place that you will find me other than on the New England Journal website, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm there. What are the new articles? What are we talking about? I want to know. I'm always there then. Thursday, JAMA Oncology. And Monday, JCO trickles out the articles, but that's where I am. I don't recommend you follow 5 journals. I recommend you pick 2 journals and learn when they drop new articles. Since you're internist, I would suggest probably JAMA and New England Journal, maybe New England Journal and Lancet, but you figure out when the articles drop and you pick 2 journals. And all you do is you take your phone out and you go to the website when the articles drop and you look and you scroll through the titles. That's all I suggest. Just scroll through the titles and see what strikes you. Why do you want to do this? You want to do this because of this. Now, I know many of you may have forgotten what this is. This is, in fact, let me check my note. It's something called a water. And apparently, human beings used to gather around this in an office work environment and talk to each other face to face. Well, who knows if that'll ever happen again, but we used to do that. In the modern world, we do something different. We talk about these articles right after they drop on Twitter, for better or worse. It's a place where a lot of academics go and they're talking about new articles. And I'm there too, for better or worse. Many days worse, but some days better. When I skim the titles of the articles, and sometimes I skim the abstract, I ask a series of questions to help me decide what is it that's going to stay on my screen longer? What am I going to really commit myself to looking at? And the questions are simple. 1, does it pertain to my practice? Is it related to my interest or not? And these days, I'm so immersed in hematology oncology that that's pretty much all I can look at, although SARS-CoV-2 is obviously going to get my attention, and sometimes occasionally cardiology because I have a little bit of an interest in it. Is it randomized or observational? Randomized controlled trials, obviously more interesting to me as a clinician because we're talking about prescribing therapeutics and they make very strong causal inferences versus observational studies. Multi-center versus single center. I think many of us have been burned by single center studies that told us that tight glycemic control was a good idea, that told us that early goal-directed therapy was a good idea, and those did not replicate in multi-center randomized trials. So for quality and process measures, I always like multi-center status. What's a sample size? For me, 100, 200, 400, 500, those kind of sample sizes pique my interest, and that's what's going to stay on my screen long, or a true phase 3 study. Is it a clinical endpoint or a surrogate endpoint? My good friend Adam Seafew at the University of Chicago likes to say a surrogate endpoint is an endpoint that the patient didn't know was important until the doctor said it was. So A1Cs, cholesterol levels, those bore me, but living longer and living better, clinical endpoints, those pique my interest. I give these to you as heuristics. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll never read an article on the right, but it means on average, I'll read articles on the left. And I won't even read that many articles. I'll probably read at most 1 or 2 articles a month. That's all I ask you to. Actually, just 1 article a month is really what you should commit to reading. But you can never read it on vacation. I think the mistake we make in residency is to print the articles and put them on our desk, thinking that the magical day in the future will come where you have all the time you can read those articles. And the truth is, you'll never read those articles. They will collect a thick layer of dust. And when you graduate and move, you will throw them in the recycling bin. That's what I did. You need to read the articles in real time or you'll never read it at all. And that's the simple fact that, life gets ahead of us. And when you're on vacation, you don't want to read 100 articles. It'll be the worst vacation ever. When you read the article, do not read it cover to cover. You cannot do that. It's so boring to read that article cover to cover. You have to have a series of questions in your mind and hunt and peck for the answer. So I like in my mind, the first thing I think about is what is the intervention? And I don't just want to have a vague idea of the intervention. I want to be able to say it in such a crisp way that if you invited me to your house for a dinner party and you asked me, VP, you read the Polo trial. What the hell do they do in the Polo trial? I want to be able to say without missing a beat. Obviously, this is a study of patients with germline BRCA mutations and pancreas cancer. And you and I both know we give those patients FOLFIRINOX therapy. What they did in this trial was they gave them 4 months of FOLFIRINOX therapy. And if you had stable disease or better, you got randomized to olaparib, 2-to-1, olaparib or sugar pill as a maintenance therapy. I want to be able to say that without missing a beat. That really proves that you understand it at a deep level. So when you read it, you have to read it in a way that you can articulate what did they do. Next thing I like to say is the control arm, what you would have done. So I would say the first thing I'd say is, as you and I both know, if I give a patient 4 months of FOLFIRINOX therapy and they're responding or they have stable disease, I'm not going to stop and give them sugar pill. No way. I'm going to give them more FOLFIRINOX, probably 2 more months, and then I'm going to switch them to 5-FU indefinitely. That's what we do. That's the standard of care. So is the control arm of the study what I would have done? Already I'm saying probably not. What is the effect size? There's a 4-month improvement in progression-free survival. Is it a clinical or surrogate endpoint? Obviously, it's a surrogate endpoint. It's a stand-in for what matters. We're going to talk more about this trial. What happened after the trial ended? This is a question unique to oncology. You need to make sure in oncology studies that the post-protocol therapy was in line with your standard of care. Any games with patient selection, I'll give you an example of that. So what I want to do is I'm looking through this paper. I'm skimming the intro. I'm reading the methods a little closer. I'm reading the results a little closer. And I'm trying to answer these questions in my mind. Answer question 1, then answer question 2, then answer question 3, and so on. And it makes it very active and it keeps my interest. Otherwise, I might not make it through the paper. And sometimes I look in the supplement. I'll be honest with you. Not always the answer's in the paper. It's in the supplement too. So I usually open the supplement as a separate PDF file. You know what this drug is, Entresto, right? You prescribe this drug, game changer, they tell me. So they tell me. I remember where I was on a Wednesday, September 11th in 2014. Actually, I think September 11th is Thursday. I think they date the article one day after they drop. I bet it was a September 10th. I don't know. Somebody fact check me on that. But it was a Wednesday evening, and I saw this article dropped, angiotensin neprilysin inhibitors versus enalapril in heart failure. I knew a little bit about the topic, not much. I had been moved into HemeOnc fellowship. My days of internal medicine were behind me, but I still remembered a little bit. I hadn't forgot it all. Like time will lead you to forget. I remembered that heart failure was very common, and this was predominantly New York Heart 2 for heart failure patients. I remember that we hadn't had a new drug in heart failure in a long time. So this looks like a new drug. It says LCZ696 superior to enalapril. That piques your interest. Maybe a new drug in heart failure. That's a $10 billion a year market share. That's big. I heard about neprilysin inhibitors. I remember that maybe several years before, Milt Packer, who's one of the authors here, he had a paper in Circ that looked at a combo ACE inhibitor, neprilysin inhibitor. It was tested against an ACE inhibitor. I don't think it came to the US market. I think it failed. And I think one of the challenges they faced, in addition to failing to improve endpoints, was a little bit of angioedema that happened when you inhibit neprilysin and ACE. I knew very little about neprilysin. I knew it had something to do with sort of the amount of fluid regulation in the body. And I know that fluid status matters for heart failure. So that's kind of all I knew when I looked at this paper. I looked at this curve. This is all-cause mortality. Whoa, I'm a cancer doctor. And in cancer medicine, we have a saying that says, if you can fit a laser pointer between the curves, you can give the plenary session at the national meeting. But in this case, you can fit maybe 5 or 6 laser pointers between those curves. And this is all-cause mortality. This is tremendous. LCZ 696 is lowering all-cause mortality over enalapril with the 4,000 person sample size per arm randomized controlled trial. My interest is piqued, and I'm going to read this paper. And in fact, I did. I asked questions and I looked for the answers. So what was the intervention? Is the control arm what you'd have done? What was the effect size? Let's go through it. What was the intervention? Well, the intervention was this new drug I'd never heard of because it didn't exist. It's called sacubitril. And they paired it with a drug I did know a lot about, and it's called valsartan. And it was paired with valsartan 160 milligrams BID. And I knew something about that dose, and that is that I had never seen anyone take that dose. Because if I took 160 milligrams of valsartan, you best have a fainting couch nearby because I will be knocked out cold. That's a hefty dose of valsartan. I think you'll agree. You probably don't get many patients to that dose of valsartan, but yet that's what they studied. What was the control arm? And I thought, what would make sense here? You got a new drug that you don't know if it works out well in human beings. You don't know if it helps us or is salutatory or not salutatory. What would be my control arm? And I said, obviously they took 10,000 people. They randomized them to the new drug plus valsartan or valsartan alone. I mean, this is a clean randomized trial. It's very elegant, makes perfect sense. This is what you ought to do. You take your ACE intolerant patients, you randomize them to ARB plus new drug or ARB, right? Wrong. They didn't do that. They randomized him to enalapril, 10 milligrams BID. That's not valsartan 160 BID. That's enalapril, 10 milligrams BID. And I thought to myself, I don't have a lot of my patients taking enalapril. It's a little bit inconvenient. And I looked at that dose and I was like, let me pull up these FDA drug labels because I'm not so sure about this dose. Turned out valsartan 160 milligrams BID, that is the maximally approved FDA dose. What about enalapril 10 BID? Yeah, it's half the maximum. You could go up to 20 BID. But they didn't do that. They maxed out at 10 BID. So then I said, okay, so it's a simple randomized trial. Okay, 10,000 people randomized. Stop what you're taking, ACEs or ARBs. You're taking it at baseline. Stop it. Take sacubitril, valsartan, or take enalapril, obviously. And what happened is I looked at the paper and I was like, no, that's not what they did. They did this. And this is messy and confusing. So I made it real simple because I'm not that bright. So I made it simple that I can explain it at a dinner party. Here's what they did. They took 10,000 people. They all had them stop whatever ACE or ARB they were taking at baseline. And they took enalapril for 14 days. And in the 14 days, they took enalapril, 1,000 of the 10,000, 10% of the population, they dropped off this study. They couldn't tolerate the medicine. A few of them died. Some of them had exacerbations. They dropped out. This is called a drug run-in period. Then what do they do? Then they had him take sacubitril valsartan for 28 days, twice as long. Of course, the first 14 days were at 80 milligrams BID, and the next 14 days were at 160 BID, because of course, you want to start with the half maximal dose and then go to the full maximal dose. And here, 1,000 people drop off the study, 1,000 people. So now 20% of the population has attrition. This is an inclusion criteria of the randomization, but it's an inclusion criteria that you cannot articulate a priori. Who is being excluded? You cannot denote them. You cannot demarcate them a priori. They're being excluded after a double drug run-in period of unequal periods of time. Then what do? Then and only then they randomize. And you're randomized to take on Tuesday, literally the same drugs and the same dose you took on Monday. That's the intervention arm. Or the control arm is to switch back to a drug you haven't taken in the last month. So one can imagine if there are several drugs in heart failure and they're all more or less equivalent, but every time you switch, a fraction of patients has exacerbation merely because of the act of switching, because that leads, there's some period of equilibrium that needs to be generated. Which arm is going to pay the price of this study? It's not the intervention arm, it's the control arm. In most randomized trials, the intervention arm pays the price of any switching, right? Because that's what you're switching into. In this trial, the control arm pays the price. very clever design, if you want to put a thumb on the scale. I found it quite interesting. I had one more question. This was a question that came up into my mind as I was reading this study. I told you that enalapril was half the maximal FDA-approved dose, and I told you that they're enrolling New York Heart 2, 3, and 4 patients, mostly 2, who were taking ACEs and ARBs at baseline. And why do they take ACEs and ARBs? Because, of course, that's a life-prolonging medicine. So the thought came in my mind, like, by chance alone, there was somebody in this study who was taking 15 milligrams BID or 20 milligrams BID before they enrolled in the study of enalapril, right? And by enrolling in the study, they got assigned to the control arm, and all it did was cap their dose. It lowered their dose. That's all you got by enrolling in the control arm. It's possible, right? By the law of big numbers, it happened to somebody for sure. And the other thing I knew was there's a mantra in cardiology that you ought to push the dose of ACE and ARBs as high as the patient can tolerate, because a analysis by the same authors as some of these study authors had shown that retrospectively, those patients do better than people you don't push the dose. So we all try to push the dose, but to some degree, doctors don't push the dose as they ought to push the dose. We could push it probably a little bit more than we push it. It just takes a little bit of effort. So my question was, what % of people in this study tolerated a higher dose of enalapril before they enrolled than they ever could get on the study? You see my point? If it is a sizable fraction of people in this study who were taking a higher dose when they enrolled than when they were randomized, the study may even be handicapping control arm participants. It may be hurting their outcomes by restricting the amount of ACE inhibition they can get. You see my point? That's what I'm trying to argue. So I looked in the supplement and I found that there was 2,000 people at baseline who were taking enalapril, and the mean dose they were taking was 16.4 milligrams, and the standard deviation was 8.3. And I am not that good with numbers, but they're online calculator. So here's what I did. I put it all in the calculator. I said, look, if you know the mean is 16.4 and the standard deviation is 8.3, and I have a cutoff of 20, which is the max dose in this study, 10 BID, how many people are taking more than that? And the calculator says that, it could be as high as 1 in 3. 1 in 3 people in this study who enrolled. And because, randomized trials enroll people who are fitter than the average patient in your practice, 1 in 3 of these people may have been able to tolerate a higher dose of RAS inhibition than the control arm capped out at. And this doesn't affect the intervention arm because they get to take a higher dose, right? You see my point. This is a big problem. I tweeted this. Actually, I think I posted a version of this talk on the internet. And somebody who's quite, one of the few moments on Twitter where you're like, I'm glad I posted that. This Gabriel Rogers, who I don't know who this person is, but he said something very clever. He said, VP, you're making a mistake. You're assuming that these drugs are dosed in a continuous way. They're not dosed in continuous. They're binned based on the pill size. And if they're binned based on the pill size, it can only be given in prescribed amounts. So let me give you a more plausible distribution. And he did all this math that you can see that obviously I don't understand, but this is the distribution he gave. And he basically says that over 30, you plausibly could think that maybe about 15% of people in this study were taking more than 10 milligrams BID when they enrolled by looking at the binning. And actually, it turns out that this is not a unique solution to this mathematical problem. This is a solution where there are many solutions, and this is one plausible solution. But again, my point, I believe, is valid, which is this trial is enrolling people, many of whom were tolerating or could tolerate a higher dose of ACE inhibition than the control arm maxed them out at. And we know that pushing the dose improves outcomes. And we also know, ironically, the new drug is paired to a drug that is pushed to the max. So it appears to be, to me, a little bit unfair. And then the last thing I did, I had Rosa on. She was a medical student at the time, and she was spectacular. And I said, Rosa, everybody is saying that Paradigm HF is unprecedented. But, the trial design seems unprecedented to me, not the result. Can you look in the literature of all cardiology drug approvals and all the trials that support them over the last 10 years? And can you tell me how many of them had a double drug run-in period of time of unequal periods? How many of them compared drug A plus B versus C, which is the comparison here, not A plus B versus B, but A plus B versus C? And how many of them were approved on the basis of one randomized control trial? So Rosa hit the book. She came back with this result. We published this. It turns out that, most trials are drug versus placebo. Some are drug A versus drug B. Some are AB versus A versus B. This is nice. You can isolate the synergy of AB versus A versus B. Some are single arm. But the comparison we're interested in is A plus B versus C. And the answer was there were just 2 studies that met that. One was this, and the other was isosorbide and hydralazine against enalapril, Bidil versus enalapril. That was the only other example. And in that case, they required a confirmatory study. They didn't require one here. This is a unique trial design. The next thing she looked at was how many trials had a run-in period, and that was about 30%. How many didn't have a run-in period, and how many they didn't even say, did they run in or didn't run in? And the reason run-ins are problematic is that a run-in period allows you to exclude people who are resistant to or intolerant to your medication, and you don't pay any penalty for that in the randomization because you don't lose them after the fact. In fact, in cancer medicine, if you talked about a run-in period and then randomization, sorry, my mic cut out. In cancer medicine, if you talk about a run-in period and randomization, people's heads will explode because we don't do it because we think it's antithetical to the purpose of the study. The purpose of the study, let's not forget, is to ask this question. If you are in clinic and you are seeing somebody on an ACE inhibitor or an ARB, is it better for you to switch him to Entresto or to raise the dose as you ought to? That's the question. And actually, this study doesn't give you an answer. It doesn't even address your question. This study asks the question that if you have tolerated if you're a patient with New York heart 2 heart failure and you're on an ACE or an ARB, if you tolerate an ACE inhibitor at submaximal dosing for 10 days and then the novel drug combo at submaximal and then maximal dosing for 28 days, is it better to stay on the novel drug combo or switch back to a drug you haven't seen in 30 days? That is really what they're testing. And that's not a question that I face that often in clinic. Okay. So for this reason, we wrote a paper that says, for these kinds of studies, you really need a confirmatory trial. You need 2 trials. In the old days of medicine, we used to do 2 randomized trials, and we didn't do that because we wanted a more stringent p-value. Oh no, we did it because we wanted to prove under a variety of circumstances a drug exerts a benefit. Here, sacubitril. Actually, you don't know what sacubitril by itself does. Sacubitril plus valsartan at 160 is better than enalapril, but you don't know what sacubitril is adding. And that's what you really need to know because that's the novel drug. My conclusion, not good. I wasn't happy. And I wrote something about it. And after I wrote something about it, they published on the New England Journal of Medicine. They used to have a blog and they published it. And then the authors of the study weren't happy. They weren't happy with me. And so somebody's not going to be happy. Either I'm not going to be happy or they're not going to be happy with me. Here's the other one. I told you about this. This was the other paper that I'll give you as an example. Maintenance olaparib. So I said, my dinner party spiel. We take patients with germline BRCA mutation. What does that mean? That means the mutation, it is in the tumor, but it's also in your germline. It's a mutation that's present throughout your body. And you have pancreas cancer, which is a subset of pancreas cancer. And the standard of care for these people tends to be a platinum-containing regimen like FOLFIRINOX, which is also the standard of care for pancreas cancer based on a randomized trial showing a survival benefit. So you give them FOLFIRINOX therapy, which is 5-FU, oxaliplatin, and irinotecan. The primary endpoint of this study is progression-free survival. And your question should be, what the heck is progression-free survival? Well, progression-free survival is a time to event, the time until something happens, composite primary endpoint. Means many things could count as the event, composite primary endpoint. Here's what it is. Scan a patient. This is the tumor on baseline. Let's say this is the head of the pancreas lesion. It has a diameter, a cross-sectional area. It has a volume. It's the time until one of 4 things happen. 1, the patient passes away. 2, there are new lesions on the scan. It was clean before in the lungs, but now there are spots. So that is a progression event. 3, the tumor gets bigger, but not just any amount bigger. It has to get 120% bigger in diameter. If it's 119%, you know what we call that? Stable disease. It's as stable as it comes, but 121%, that is progression. And do you know how many people walk into the clinic and they say, Doc, I feel good. I feel fine. I'm doing great. And then they come in 3 days later and they say, oh boy, something feels off. And it's because they went from 119 to 122%. And the answer is nobody, because people don't feel anything special at this arbitrary juncture that has been selected. The other thing that could happen is the tumor shrinks. If the tumor shrinks more than 30%, well, that's a responder, obviously. And if it grows then subsequently 20% from the nadir value, it is progression. So one of these 4 things could happen, or something in between 3 and 4. Could happen, and that's progression-free survival, the time until one of these 4 endpoints. It is reminiscent of some of these diabetes trials that I read, where it says the time until the patient goes blind, the time until the patient develops renal failure requiring dialysis, or the time until the A1C goes up 0.5 percentage point. And it's always that combo, 2 very important things, and then the 0.5 percentage point A1C and that composite primary endpoint. And often it's the last thing that does the driving. And of course, you have something called MACE, which is a primary endpoint of cardiology studies, major adverse cardiovascular events, which is a composite endpoint. So back to the study. So this is a study, new drug, $12,000 a month drug versus sugar pill for people who got 4 months of FOLFIRINOX therapy. I already told you I wouldn't give 4, I'd give 6, and then I'd give indefinite 5-FU. I wouldn't give a sugar pill. I think that's, to my knowledge, sugar pills don't fight cancer. I'm willing to go on record and say that controversial statement that a sugar pill is not doing anything for this pancreas cancer. I also don't think it's fueling it, which is another popular idea. Here's the result. This is the PFS Kaplan-Meier curve. You see that? What do you think? Come on. I told you. If you fit a laser pointer between the curves, you can give the plenary session. And indeed, you can fit a laser pointer between these curves. It's looking quite good. We in oncology, we say I'm intrigued. We're intrigued. $12,000 a month, more toxicity, inappropriate control arm, but 7 versus 4 month PFS benefit. I'm intrigued. And in fact, we'll talk about that and where that intrigue led. But I'm an old-fashioned doctor. I want to know if my patients live longer or live better. So I like to look at that overall survival. And here's the overall survival. Oh boy. I'm no expert, but I would say that that's not so good for a $12,000 a month pill, that the survival curves are kind of superimposable. Now, the company likes to say, well, the survival data is not yet mature. That's a word that they like to use. But when I see median survivals reached and it's 18 months and overlapping curves, I'm a little shocked what maturity is going to do to those curves. Are they going to split magically apart? I have my doubts. And in fact, now I know that it didn't split magically apart. We have the updated results. Okay. So what was the intervention? I told you, new pill, sugar pill. Is control arm what you would have done? Absolutely not. I think it's a delinquent control arm. What was the effect size? I would say modest, but was it a clinical surrogate as a surrogate endpoint? And I'm going to skip the last 2 questions, they're not relevant here. But my mind started to wander. My mind started to wander. I was thinking about this. I was like, let me see. You got these patients with platinum therapy. You gave them 4 months. I already told you many times that I would have given them 6 months. Okay, and then you go olaparib sugar pill. This is how they did it. Okay, here's what I found when I was looking around on the supplement. The response rate, I told you, that's the percentage of people who have 30% or more tumor shrinkage. That was 19% from olaparib, right? It was 9% on sugar pill, 9.7% on sugar pill. Let me say that again. It was 20% of people had 30% or more tumor shrinkage from when they enrolled on the study simply by taking the active drug olaparib. Okay, I believe that. But 10% of people enrolled on this study and they had 30% or more tumor shrinkage from taking a sugar pill. And that raises the question. Sugar pill don't shrink tumors 30%. They do not do that. In fact, in a pooled analysis of all placebo-controlled arms of studies, it's about 2%. And that's the measurement error of response. Why is it 10% in this study? Who has a guess? Somebody has to put it in the chat. No, we will not go on. Sugar pill is contaminated with chemo treatment. The sugar pill had no chemo with it, but you're on to something. What? Say it again instead of contaminated. They took 4 months. Oh, maybe there's another. I have another visual. Ah, yes. Okay, here's what happens. They have the tumor and they take chemo for 4 months, and then one arm they take olaparib, and in the other arm they take chemo for 4 months, and then one arm they take sugar pill, and they're measuring from the middle ball to the right ball. The response is happening here. So why is sugar pill 10%? Selection bias, I would say, is an interesting thought, but of course it's randomized. It's randomized from the middle ball. So I don't think it's a selection bias issue. Why is the tumors are really shrinking? 10% of people have 30% or more tumor shrinkage after they take a sugar pill. And I'm going to speculate it's not due to the sugar pills. What is it due to? Yes, it's due to the chemo. Yes. Shrinking a tumor, some of these difficult tumors, is like getting a freight train moving. When you push it up to speed, if you suddenly stop administering the engine, you stop the engine, it's still going to roll on for a while. It has some inertia to it. And what this is showing you is that these people are responding to chemo that they have not received for weeks because you've put them on a sugar pill. The reason I raise this point is imagine if the control arm had been continued chemotherapy, which is the standard of care. Imagine it wouldn't have been 10%. It might not have even been 20%. It might have been 30 or 40%. It might have been way higher. So in fact, this study doesn't tell me that olaparib is better than sugar pill. It makes me really wonder if olaparib is a harmful intervention, what I would have actually done in my practice. You see my point? Okay, polo trial. Let's just summarize. We're all you take a therapy that's normally not halted, and you randomize them to a new costly toxic pill or placebo. Classic oncology. You measure an endpoint that's never been accepted as a measure of what matters, because you know why? You don't need a surrogate endpoint in a disease when overall survival occurs with 18 months, because you don't need to save any time. You can directly measure survival. We don't use surrogate endpoints in places where you can measure the event of interest. It's like saying a surrogate endpoint for a hospitalized ICU patient on 4 pressors with SARS-CoV-2. You don't need a surrogate endpoint. There is a mortality that's going to occur within 30 days in a high percentage. You can just look at that endpoint. You don't improve survival. Quality of life, I didn't show you. It's no better with the drug. No surprise. 12 grand a month, no better. What do you think the US FDA does? No survival benefit, no quality of life benefit, delinquent control arm, and I would even say unethical control arm. What does the US FDA do? What do they do? Any guesses in the chat? They do the right thing, which is on the question of whether olaparib in this setting has a favorable risk-benefit profile, the ODAC members voted narrowly in favor, 7-5. Oh, yes, it's approved, my friends. And the answer is, quote, heck yeah. Heck yeah is the quote by the expert. Heck yeah. When I look at this, I don't think heck yeah. I think this is a great disservice to people with this cancer. It may even erode their survival. It may not enhance it. And I also worry that we are living in a field where smart people will call this heck yeah. To be honest, it worries me more that a smart person will say heck yeah than even that the drug was approved, because that worries me that the impartiality of doctors is absolutely rotten in this field. Okay, those were the 3 takeaway points. What are the best techniques to keep up with literature? What are examples of studies that are commonly misinterpreted? How you can be a better reader? To summarize, the best techniques to keep up with the literature are: you will never be able to read all the studies in the future. You'll never read them on your vacation. Don't even try. You have to develop some routine you can live with. It doesn't have to be a lot. If you read 1 paper a month, you're going to be crushing it compared to your colleagues. Most doctors don't read 1 paper a month. Most people, they may not even read 1 paper fully. I think most people practice based on not even reading an abstract, based on overhearing what somebody's heard about the abstract. I think that's where that's the bar of where we're practicing. You read 1 paper a month, you're going to be really good at reading papers after a year. Promise you that. You need a way to keep up with what people are saying, because you can go on Twitter and there are a few people who have thoughtful comments who will help you think about trials. What are some examples of common misconceptions? I think the control arms of studies, how we randomize, who are we including, extrapolating that to general populations. These are all classic problems in these studies. How can you be a better reader? You just have to keep doing it. It's an apprenticeship model. You will be a much better consumer of medical information when you commit to the task of being a better reader. I do worry that in medicine, we increasingly clamor for opportunities to, be successful. But we have forgotten to some degree that the greatest success that comes in medicine is if you build yourself to be a better doctor. Nobody may ever praise you for that, but you will know that you're practicing better than you practiced the year before. And that, I think, will give you some deep satisfaction. Okay, so I think it might be better just to do questions, but I always bring 2 extra parts of this. I have a little spiel about why nutritional epidemiology is very, very bad, like learning why these things, they don't, New York Times studies about these things, they don't tell you much. I have another little spiel about parachutes and when we do randomized trials. I'm happy to do one of those, or I'm more happy to do questions. So why don't I pause and see what you all prefer? And if these things, what do you think about apps like Journal Club? I'm not too familiar with these apps. I guess I would say in my field of oncology, I think, I review a lot of the studies on Plenary sessions, so that's a good place. I think if you're in general internal medicine, you have like ACP, and I think ACP does a very good impartial job of reviewing things. I think if you're going to go into cardiology, good luck to you. If you're going to go into a field where there's a lot of heavy influence from the biopharmaceutical industry, the information landscape will be increasingly controlled by that industry. And for you to get impartial, high quality evidence, I think you can't, I don't know if there's any external source you can trust. I think you'll have to do it yourself. And even Cochrane collaboration, which used to be quite impartial, now I believe is leaning in a sort of pro-treatment, pro-pharmaceutical industry direction. So I guess I really struggle with the specialties. We desperately need people in the specialties because the money is flowing to the specialties to try to generate impartial content for people to think about. Any other questions?
Thanks, Dr. Prasad. I just have a question that's maybe like a little bit off base here, but I just wanted to see what you think. But
Nothing's off
uh,
base.
I was wondering, so like this, in terms of COVID vaccination here, many of us have received our COVID vaccine in like January, and no one has gotten the second dose in Quebec as far as we know, and it's not scheduled up to like 4 months later. And I was wondering if you have read any literature or evidence for that. And I know it's like an interesting question, like to balance the public health risks versus maybe some pharmaceutical interests as well.
That's a great question. I guess I would say this debate, I initially called 1 versus 2 dose vaccine gate. I have a YouTube video on this where I try to articulate the arguments for both sides of the debate. But the debate is but then later I was admonished by some senior folks to call it 2 dose versus delayed second dose vaccine gate, because they don't want to let you off the hook. They want to get that shot in your arm eventually. So it's 2 dose on schedule, which is 21-day Pfizer and 28-day Moderna, or delayed second dose. Okay. When the argument was initially offered, there were a lot of arguments both ways. One argument was by giving 1 dose to more people, you will dramatically reduce, you'll get some benefit, 60, 70, 80% efficacy from that 1 dose. It's not going to be 95% relative risk reduction. It'll be something. And that is a better population strategy at lowering the toll of SARS-CoV-2 than giving 2 doses to half as many people. A number of modeling studies have appeared, and I believe one was done by some folks in Canada. I know one of the authors was in Kingston, Ontario, at Queen's, but I think there's another Toronto author, and maybe an author in your place. And I was submitted to at the provincial level, and I think that shows under a number of assumptions, the delayed second dose strategy will save more lives. There's now a paper, I believe, it's a research letter in the ACP in the Annals of Internal Medicine that I think supports that. And I think I saw one more modeling study that supports that strategy. One of the counter arguments is there are some virologists who think that you may be more likely to evolve vaccine escape mutants or variants or scariants, as some people are calling it, because they're meant to scare. If you do the delayed second dose strategy, I think I think one could argue that both ways. I know there are some compelling arguments they offer from a bioplausibility standpoint, but the compelling argument against that is that the probability of vaccine escape is to some degree proportional to the number of people who are replicating vaccine in their body at any moment in time. And so if delayed second dose will lower the cumulative number of viral replication cycles, then possibly it'll lower the probability of vaccine escape. Putting it all together, initially I was agnostic. The last point, your point about company interest. Of course, the company's interest is to like make sure nobody gets off the hook and give you 2 shots. And the company's real interest, of course, is that every year you're going to get a booster. Don't think you're off the hook. Moderna's whole goal in life is that for the rest of your life, you're going to get a booster each winter. They're going to boost you up. And I believe it's coming. And I think we'll have to have some, vigorous debates about what the evidence bar should be to boost me. Because I will admit, the AEs on this are not the AEs of a flu shot. I don't know about you, but I got a bazooka in the arm. I don't know what they did, a bazooka. So I think it's something to debate. Putting it all together, initially I was undecided. And when I made the video on YouTube, I was undecided because I thought you could argue it both ways. And there were some like second order arguments, like if you give people delayed second dose, many people may never come back, or many people may, no longer have confidence in vaccine. However, after I have looked at more data, I lean towards the delayed second dose strategy at a population level, like the UK has done, and apparently Quebec province, because I do think the majority of the studies suggest that it will be more likely to contain the virus and lead to fewer number of deaths, which I think is really the goal of vaccination. I think I will say the vaccine has deeply impressed me. If you asked me last year, would we have a authorized vaccine by the end of the year? I would say no. My whole career has been deeply critical of the pharmaceutical industry, but on this occasion, I take my hat off to them and I give them credit because they did do a very good job. And I will give credit where credit is due. Cancer drugs, I will be back to hounding them, but on this point, I give them credit.
Thanks a lot. That's most of what we were discussing as well, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? I guess our time is up. Or we could talk about, I don't know, do people want to talk about this when you do randomized trials real quick? Okay. You know, every once in a while in biomedicine, we get into these debates, and these debates go something like this. I go to the unit and they consult me for some impella or balloon pump that these cardiologists have placed. And I know they like to do it. They always have a big smile on their face when they tell me about this impella. And then I ask them questions that I think are very simple, but they don't think so, which are, what are the randomized control trials that show putting in this impella will improve survival? And they say, my God, man, we can't do a randomized trial. There's no equipoise because this is in fact a parachute. And that is a reference to this old paper that came out in the BMJ that said, when you have an intervention like a parachute, you don't need to do a randomized trial. In fact, they looked for randomized trials of parachutes. There were none. And we know a parachute works, right? Because if you go on an airplane without a parachute, your chance of survival is actually, it's not zero. There's actually a few case reports. But if you wear a parachute, it's 99.9999997. I think it is it's 7 fatalities per 10 million jumps or something like that. It's not zero because sometimes that parachute gets tangled, but it is pretty close to zero. So we're talking about an intervention that improves all-cause mortality 99.9999% at a 15-minute time horizon. That's why we don't do a randomized trial of that. And these authors wrote this funny thing where they say, we think that everyone would benefit if the most radical protagonists of EBM organized and participated in a double-blind crossover RCT of the parachute. And I think that means me. And I don't like that crossover part because that's a tough one. So the way I think about it, I know we have like 5 minutes left. The way I think about it is this. The other argument I hear is that, of course, we can't do a randomized trial of impella because we didn't do a randomized trial of smoking, did we? We didn't do a randomized trial to know that smoking is harmful. Ergo, we can't do a randomized trial of impella. Here's how I think about it. There's an axis between the thing you can do that hurts somebody the most and the thing you can do that helps somebody the most. And in the middle is no net effect, right? What's something you can do that really hurts somebody? Well, I'm not the expert in it, but I guess you could shoot them. Boom. If you shoot them someplace sensitive, I think they're not going to do so hot. You can hit them with a car at 60 miles an hour. I don't think people will do so well there. There's never been a randomized trial, turns out, of shooting somebody point blank range. But yet we do concede it's harmful. We'll concede it's harmful. What can you do that benefits somebody? What can you do that really helps them? Well, you can put a parachute on them and throw them out of an airplane. Or if you catch me in San Francisco and you see me walking, obviously I'll be staring down at my phone because, of course, it's 2 p.m. Pacific time on a Wednesday, and I'm looking at the New England Journal website. I'm looking at my phone. All of a sudden, you pull me back, and a bus whizzes by, and you say, "My God, pay attention to what you're doing. You almost got killed by that bus. I saved your life." I'm going to say, well, you're right. You did save my life because that bus was going to hit me. It wasn't going to be pretty. There's never been a randomized trial if you pull me out of the way of the bus that I would save my life because it has a massive effect size. Okay. What about smoking? You know, if you smoke, you could get cancer. Your odds ratio is 20, you'll get cancer. That's kind of a big effect. Actually, it's dramatic, quite dramatic. But what about smoking and coronary artery disease? Isn't that like 2 or 3? Or bladder cancer is like 2? It's like not as big a signal, but it's still a signal. What about eating bacon once a week? Come on. I think the in the pooled meta-analytic estimate, it's like 1.5, 1.7 odds ratio of harm. No biggie, I like to say. It's closer to the null. Okay. What about the things we do? Repleting someone's potassium, giving somebody rivaroxaban for CHADS 2-3 AFib, giving them a hydrochlorothiazide for 7 years because their blood pressure is 152 over 86. What are the things we do in biomedicine? Well, they have some salutatory effect. We're in the prescribing salutatory treatments game, but it ain't a parachute. Effect sizes are modest and small. And what I wish to argue to you, what I wish you to understand is that RCTs are done here, and only here. An RCT is a tool to assess causality, and we deploy it on interventions that have a purported modest to marginal effect size. We think they'll benefit somebody, but the effect size is modest to marginal. We don't do it for parachutes because you don't need an RCT for a parachute. It's really obvious. And we don't do it for deleterious interventions. We don't randomize people to drinking a bottle of benzene. We know it's harmful. You do risk factor epidemiology on the bad side. If you find eating bacon is detrimental, you can do an RCT, but it would be a randomized trial of encouraging people to abstain from bacon versus to have the occasional bacon standard of care, which is what people do, right? And if, to be honest with you, if you ran such a randomized trial, I suspect it would be null. I don't think it will have an effect. That like admonishing people not to eat bacon is not going to be beneficial to their health. That's my guess. Why do we do RCTs here? We do RCTs because RCTs are the only thing that can separate our bias, our optimism, our profiteering from the true effect. And we are prone to believing our things work, and we're prone to underestimating all the ways they don't work. And so when people who say you can't do it, we didn't do an RCT of smoking, says you can't do an RCT of the Impella, I would say, yeah, you can. In Impella, it ain't a 99% benefit. It's in the RCT zone. And if you want to sell this very costly product, you need to do one, or I'm not going to pay for it. In fact, I think we've tried to cut their payments in a number of ways, but it's very difficult. The industry wants you to believe that their treatments cannot be assessed with RCT. And I believe that almost always that's wrong. Almost always that's wrong. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm happy to take a few more questions. We got a minute or two. Otherwise, I wish you well. Send me a copy of the recording. I will, yeah. Thanks. All right, if no questions, I'm off to the next Zoom, and the misery of Zoom continues for another hour. I wish you all well. Thank you.